Honorable Judge Tingy, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak before you today. I would first like to read a quote that I feel is relevant to today's proceedings. Quote, "It's not the person refusing to let go of the past, but the past refusing to let go of the person." End quote. Author unknown. I'm going to attempt to take the last 25 years of chaos and try to turn them into a comprehensive and coherent victim impact statement. My name is Todd Dodge. I am the second oldest of 4 children, and Angie was the only sister that I had. She was 9 years younger than me, and because of our age gap, we were not close as children. I have fond but few memories of her, which I hold close to my heart. I loved her, and I painfully, mournfully wish I wasn't robbed of the chance to get to know her more deeply. Today, I long to hear her voice and see her smile. I, like many others, am a forgotten victim that has sat in the shadows, hiding my own pain, sorrow, anger, and devastation. I have participated in numerous court proceedings, driven hundreds of miles, and moved across state lines, trying to give support where I could. I have given a victim impact statement in a trial that resulted in a false conviction for the murder of my sister. Often, I was persecuted for my efforts throughout the last 25 chaotic years. It is sad to now know that those previous efforts were all in vain because Angie's voice was still silent. Your Honor, I have suffered from PTSD, depression, anger, anxiety, and antisocial behaviors. As a result of the chaos of the last 25 years, I often feel like an extra in a movie as I watch another chapter of my disturbing life unfold with each new television series or news article that showcases my family and the tragic death of Angie. I have to experience again and again painful childhood memories and years full of abuse and neglect I endured at the hands of my parents. When childhood photos appear on the television screens or newspapers glamorizing our family and this horrific event, it is a complete facade and hides the reality of it all. The broadcasting of my childhood is a ceaseless and tormenting reminder of the physical and emotional scars I carry from my childhood. I am forced to remember my youth and the 8-inch scar that I wear on my back. I am forced to remember the brutal, murderous death of my sister. I am forced to endure the chaos and to mourn and grieve for her again and again and again and again. I have ached in anticipation for too many years for justice to come. Your Honor, it is justice we seek here today. Because of Mr. Dripp's premeditated actions, he sentenced me to a lifetime of hell. And so far, I have served 9,126 days. Almost 25 years, and while I suffered my sentence, he, the murderer that he is, walked free. And while he walked free, the tidal wave of chaos he left in his wake continued to destroy and scar lives. I feel that there are others that should have an opportunity to have their voices heard as his victims. Victims like myself that have been directly impacted by Mr. Dripp's murderous actions. Although he did not murder them, he took their lives from them. They are not permitted to speak today and are mandated to sit in silence. This injustice is alarming and tragic, Your Honor. To begin, Chris Tapp should be given the opportunity to voice his nightmare to this court. At 20 years old, he received a sentence of 30 years for a crime he did not commit. He served and lost 20 years of his life because of Mr. Dripp's. The former jurors that convicted Mr. Tapp should also be here, all victims of a process gone bad, regular people deceived by a process that convicted an innocent man and robbed him of 20 years, forced to now live with their decision and their guilt. Their voices matter too. Michael Esri Jr. should be given an opportunity to share his story. The second man wrongfully connected to Angie's death, his ordeal lasted a horrifying 6 weeks. He and his family's privacy invaded. He will forever be tied to the chaos that has become Angie's story. Over 100 men subjected to DNA testing over the last 25 years. Their privacy was violated, their characters questioned, and activities scrutinized in the search for Angie's murder. These men are not allowed to speak before you today, but are all victims of the chaos that Mr. Dripp's left behind. The Idaho Falls Police Department, the initial detectives and investigators, and many other law enforcement support personnel and other individuals who spent countless hours on this case had their careers and reputations destroyed. They endure the wrath of public scorn and shame from the awful burden they carry over the incarceration of Chris Tapp. All should be here speaking of their tragedies and the torment from the chaos. Jack Dodge, Angie's father, should be here today, but he passed in 2004. Just like the picture, his memory has faded from us. His sorrow is forgotten. Jack was a retired Navy veteran who struggled with his own childhood demons, yet completed 2 successful tours in Vietnam, which produced even more demons. At the time of his only daughter's murder, he was a recovering alcoholic, finally sober. However, soon after Angie's brutal death, he began drinking again. He died a lonely, heartbroken individual. Personally, I feel Mr. Dripp's is the final demon that destroyed Jack and bears some responsibility for his isolation and death. The more I wrote my impact statement, Your Honor, the more I began to realize the enormity of that problem and the absolute devastation and chaos that Mr. Dripp's created in my life and many others via his selfish, murderous actions. He dropped an atomic bomb in the center of our family and our community. He destroyed the central core of our lives and many others when he slaughtered Angie. The enormity of his actions reached across county and state lines. The shockwaves of that chaos are still being felt to this day. I have searched in vain for adequate words to describe the devastation and chaos. Then I realized words were insufficient to demonstrate the absolute horror of the circumstances. In pursuit of these words, I realized I had lost sight of what this was really about. You see, I have the opportunity to verbalize before you today. Angie's voice was severed, cut from her body, silenced forever 25 years ago by Mr. Drips. Really, she is the one who should be here speaking, telling her story of the true suffering, brutality, butchery, murder, and rape that took place at the hands of Mr. Drips when he executed his premeditated actions. It's disturbing that in the weeks prior to Angie's death, she was fearful that someone was stalking her. An anonymous letter left on her car scared her enough she reached out to one of her brothers who drove to town to check on her. My little sister was living in fear. And then on June 13th, 1996, she was found brutally murdered and raped. And if the court will allow, and with some assistance, I ask you to permit me to display a graphic representation of the enormity of the problem. The picture represents the devastating chaos I've had to deal with the last 25 years. Your Honor, I would like to present it now. Will the court please grant permission and assistance to display this?
It's hard to know what you're going to show me. Any objection, counsel?
Your Honor, I believe the photos have been submitted as part of the pre-sentence report. I don't know how benefit does.
Scheme.
No, I think I have not seen the photograph, but I believe it's the same that have been provided in the pre-sentence investigation. I think it would benefit Mr. Dodge's statement.
All right, go ahead, Mr. Dodge.
Give me just a second, Your Honor.
Your Honor, it's a little sacred to us. Can I help him?
Sure.
Your Honor, that is Roger Dodge, the brother of the come next.
I would prefer if it get laid out on the floor,
Oh,
if that's possible.
I guess it's possible.
It's okay. Meet Angie, my little sister. From receiving her death notice to moving items out of Angie's apartment where this butchering took place, and more recently, the guilt of realizing I had an encounter with Mr. Drips the day that we boxed up her things. It continually disturbs me to know Mr. Drips lived just across the street and planned this horrific event, stalking, preparing, and then executing his evil plan. He watched the chaos of the aftermath unfold, feigning innocence, while we, her family, emptied her apartment, grieving and mourning what he stole from us. The smells of the crime scene and cleaner are still thick in the air. That crime scene is speaking, Your Honor. Angie is crying out, asking you to hear her voice, to hear her words of how this crime impacted her. The size of the photo pales in comparison to the enormity of the situation and the enormity of the horrific nature of Mr. Drips' actions. He violently slit her throat from ear to ear and watched as she lay there aspirating on her own blood. The horror and pain she experienced haunts me as an older sibling as a brother, as a human. Mr. Drips did not call for medical assistance. He did not seek out medical care so that she would be able to live. No, he did not. He raped her, and he gained control and silenced her. Likely while she was laying there, he raped her. It is disturbing to scroll through Mr. Drips' Facebook posts and read that some of his friends refer to him as Sling Blade. This is before Mr. Drips was arrested. Sling Blade, the movie, ironically came out in 1996. It depicts a male that uses a knife and viciously murders several individuals. Is this just a coincidence or just another level of the chaos? Not only did Mr. Drips destroy the sanctity of Angie's life, he further destroyed my immediate family members. He destroyed my children's trust and safety of their own childhood. To this day, my older children who are reaching 30 years of age do not visit the Idaho Falls area. It is a dark reminder of where something bad happened to their aunt they never got to know. To them, Mr. Drips is the boogeyman. There is only one man that is responsible for the complete and utter destruction that has taken place. The collateral damage of Mr. Drips' actions extends far and wide. The physical and monetary devastation that has been inflicted upon us and this community is astonishing. For the last 25 years, Mr. Drips has stayed intentionally hidden from us. Mr. Drips had never intended to come forward. Mr. Drips was completely happy, living his life of lies, while those in Angie's circle swirled in chaos. He kept silent for 23 years while the chaos in our lives raged on. Had it not been for advances in forensic technology, Mr. Drips would never have been apprehended, would never have confessed, would never have come face those whose lives and community he destroyed and brutalized. He has no intention to right his wrongs, holds no remorse, offers pathetic excuses, and recently made comments to the PSI investigator that he only deserves 10 years. He continues to victimize Angie, our family, and this community. Mr. Drips is the definition of evil. He never wanted to confess his crimes to this court or take responsibility for this atrocity against us and this community. He was completely happy to sit back, retire, watch another man do time for a crime that only Mr. Drips committed. He was happy seeing our family and other families in complete ruins, devastated and torn apart by the chaos that he left behind, showing no remorse, no regret, no concern for anyone but himself. He has been the director in this real-life horror he created for us all. This past February, Mr. Drips was given the opportunity to confess his crime, to stand and allocute his guilt. Instead, Mr. Drips gave a lackluster, half-hearted, pathetic, non-committal allocution statement. He had to be prodded by the court to give additional details that still fell tremendously short of the horror and rage you can see that he delivered to my sister. He has the audacity to plead for mercy from this court, whereupon he showed Angie none. Our family, Chris Tapp, Michael Esri, and IFPD, and many, many other men, absolutely no mercy. He has the audacity to ask you to send him to a special medical unit. What special medical attention did he provide Angie? He used the excuse that he was using cocaine and alcohol at the time, which is yet another convenient attempt to excuse this horrible, premeditated crime. He provides no evidence to prove his statement. Are we to believe he was on cocaine and drunk for weeks while he stalked and insidiously planned to violate Angie? It's simply Mr. Drips, once again, downplaying and excusing himself for his role in this crime and the chaos that it ensued. It is offensive. I can look back and complain about the last 25 years. I can blame the process, the police, and the misleads, and the wheels of justice. It is nothing compared to what Angie, my little sister, had to endure that night. Ultimately, the only person that bears responsibility for this absolute chaotic destruction, loss, and pain in my life and many others is Mr. Drips. It lies solely on his blood-soaked hands. Your Honor, I beg this court to deny this plea agreement. I am not in agreement with it. I voiced my concerns to the prosecution during mediation. I was discounted, I was deceived, I was dismissed. Once again, forced to sit in the shadows, made to feel like my voice, the voice of others, and especially Angie's voice, does not matter. This plea agreement falls tremendously short of the debt Mr. Drip owes. I ask you, Your Honor, to give Angie her voice back. Give back to Angie what Mr. Drips severed 25 years ago. You are the only one that has the authority to do so. I ask that you make Mr. Drips sit for a jury trial. I ask that you allow a jury of his peers to determine his fate. If Mr. Drips can't give a proper allocution of the events that took place on June 13th, 1996, then let the crime scene speak for him. Let Angie finally have a place at the table and not on the floor. Let her speak from the grave. Let her voice be heard about the absolute brutality she suffered that night. Let the wrongs of the past be corrected so that all victims can finally live in peace. Let the true story of these horrific events finally be revealed to tell the real story that Angie has wanted told for so many years. Let her voice be heard and let the chaos end. Your Honor, thank you.
Next statement.
Roger Dodge, Your Honor, another brother of Sandy's.
I don't think I need this today. Your Honor, thank you for this opportunity to speak.
Excuse me, I do need to hear.
Oh, you can't hear me? Okay.
Turn it off, Roger.
Oh. Sorry about that. Thank you for this opportunity to speak, Your Honor. My name is Roger Dodge, Angie's older brother. 25 years ago, this was, and still is, the most devastating thing I've ever been through in my life. I consider Mr. Drips to be the very definition of evil. This is it. I know his family would probably disagree with that. You know him differently than we do. I would like to point out that had he been apprehended 25 years ago, there's a couple of people sitting in this room today that wouldn't be here. I'm not picking on them, I'm just pointing it out. His son Brian, his daughter Haley, wouldn't be here today.
I object. This is not a proper victim impact statement to point out members of my client's family.
Dodge, the purpose of a victim impact statement is to identify how this crime has affected you personally. So I am going to have to ask you to try to limit it to that.
Okay, sir. I apologize. Two weeks before Angie was murdered, I went to visit Angie with my ex-wife, and she was pregnant. One of the sweetest things that I can remember is Angie bending over and kissing my ex-wife's belly. She could not wait for my daughter to be born. Miriam was born on the 17th. Angie was buried on the 18th. As you can all imagine, that was a very devastating week for me. And it still is. I cannot believe how long that she's been in a casket, laying in a grave she shouldn't be in. I too feel that a court hearing, a jury trial, would be more beneficial than what we've had here. I disagree with it wholeheartedly. It would be more closure, not only for myself, I think it would be justice for Angie and for this community, actually. To be robbed of a jury trial is just wrong. I don't see how else Mr. Drips could face this. I really don't. When I replay in my mind the crime scene photos that I've looked at and the morgue photos, it's indescribable. All you could want is justice for the crime. That's all you could ask for. When you look at those photos of her slit throat, blood between her legs, a large slash on her breast, knife wounds in her hands, blood on her face, in her hair. Anyone in this position would want justice. This is not a mystery. Obviously, hindsight's 20/20. It was Occam's razor all along. He lived right across the street. It's absolutely unbelievable. And here we are today. Only just barely getting justice just since 2019. I find that very unbelievable. Your Honor, I'll just finish here. I want justice for my sister. She deserves that. Having the death penalty taken off the table, hey, we were supposed to be in a jury trial this week, if I'm not mistaken. I was looking forward to that. I hope that we still get that. Thank you. All right, I'm going to shut this off.